Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this August 12th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com Pacific Time, Monday through Friday. You can also listen to the show at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, Monday through Friday, and unfortunately, if you can't go to those two shows, we really wish you would. Go to my long-standing website at arcticbeacon.com, where you can get shows going back over 10 years, articles, shows documenting the Vatican-led New World Order. And before I start my show today, let me thank a couple listeners who really help me out with that website and put up my shows and do a great job in making sure that they keep me straight. What I mean by that is sometimes I put a show on the wrong day and the wrong time, and then I make a mistake, and they always point it out so that I can correct those. And I really want to thank the listeners that do that for me. We have a small but very, very intellectually smart audience. And the audience on my show understands probably more than I do. And I just try to be a messenger and bring this long-lasting story that has really carved out the history of mankind from the beginning in a way that is very deceptive and takes on biblical proportions, and we've tried to discuss that. So I want to thank those people, especially one person who really does help me, and she knows who she is. Thank you so much. Okay, secondly, I want to get some things off my desk before we embark on this show today, which I'm going to tell you is going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned, listen, it's going to be great. So, on Monday, I'm going to go back to Rome and interview Leo Zagami again. Important information about the coup in Turkey, new information regarding certain immigration policies that are being implemented in Italy, which mirror what they're trying to do here, as the American government has its hand in this new Italian government again, who's decriminalized immigration, and as Leo says, causing real havoc there. It's not the city that I remember where I lived in the 80s. Very safe, very good city. I walked every cobblestone street in that town at any hour of the day or night and never had a problem, and was graciously accepted by the Italian people who love their families, love their country, and are a very, very independent sort. And I'll point some of that out in another show. So we'll have Leo on Monday. Now Tuesday, I'm going to bring back Bert Krantz of the Alamo Ministry. And the last show was really riveting. Go to the last show I did Tuesday last. And Bert's got some great information. I want to keep the story of how Christians are being persecuted in this country as well as around the world, while the Obama and Clinton group are basically sympathizing with this Muslim radical terrorism. And I've shown how they actually are making this war on terror that they created a reality all over the world, and it's coming here. And your president has really helped this along, and I'm going to bring that up on many shows that I do. So Bert's going to come on and talk a lot about the persecution of his ministry here. And I mentioned on the one of my other shows how it's going on all over the world. Somebody please check out Nigeria. We have an onslaught of, and Leo was saying, there's many, many people coming from Africa into Italy, but why not Christians? Very interesting. They're leaving them there to be genocided. That's the reason. And we're going to get into a lot of that in the future, so just stay tuned. But today, okay, I promised a fun show, and we're going to do that. Friday, here on the Investigative Journal, this is part 6 of what I call the greatest theatrical stage play ever produced in the history of mankind. And it comes up every 4 years. And what I mean by that is the 2016 presidential elections. And let me preface it by saying I look at these elections through the prism, through the eyeglass of a moviegoer. And what I mean by that is I look through the movie camera lens just like I do when I turn on the TV or I watch a movie that's on HBO or whatever, or all the different movies that come out. I look at the presidential election as the big show. And what I mean by the big show is that this one outdoes anything Hollywood ever did. And I want you for a while to look at it that way. When you look at this election, don't look at it like it's real. Look at it like these people that are basically on stage, and they do this daily now until November 8th, and then they'll have a big coronation of whoever they select, and that's pre-written, select as the president of the U.S. corporation, which they don't tell you. That's so strange. They don't tell you these things. And let me get into that later. But so look at it as a movie. Look at it, and we've done this in the first the 5 parts I've done so far, and we got a lot of parts coming on this. I don't know where it's going to stop. I'm keeping going, and this will be part 6. So I want to maybe at the end put them all together and send them to the writers who are, the writers of this theatrical event that's going on are the Jesuits. Yes, and the producer of this is the Vatican itself. They are the producers of this great script. And you wonder, well, how could these people do that? They are just priests. The Pope is over in Rome. Well, if you go back to a lot of my shows, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you want to know who they really are, you can just go and Google Jesuit deception, Vatican involvement in the New World Order, and there's a lot of script writers out there trying to get their story in too, but it just doesn't seem to get in. Let me give you an example, and then I'm going to explain to you today, well, in the past episodes that I've done, and now we're looking at this as a movie, and let me explain what this movie is really happening here. What happens is they select their actors, the main actors, every 4 years, and then we know who they are this year, and we're going over their history of how they're connected and how they get their role, how they're cast into this role. And we've talked about Obama and his connections to the writers and the Jesuits, and his connection to the Vatican, and all the people that work for him that seem to be connected to them as well. And those are the supporting actors, and et cetera, et cetera. But then we went to Donald Trump, the latest guy that's come on the big show, the big stage. Yes, he is. He's on the big stage now. He was a reality actor on TV for many years, as well as being a billionaire businessman, a master builder. And we've talked about his connections to the Jesuits, the writers, and some of the real things that makes me understand how he got cast into this role. We haven't yet talked about the old hag actress, Hillary Clinton, and I'm going to save that for next week because we know her quite well, don't we? We've seen her on the stage for, God, ever since I can remember, in the 70s. Yeah, I remember her on, starting her little career. In fact, personally, she grew up in my hometown, where I lived. I used to walk the same street she did. She went to either Maine East or Maine South High School. I went to Notre Dame High School. And she grew up right there. So obviously it's not in the water to become this great actress who's depicted as a liar, thief, and basically is depicted on stage as someone that's so boring. I mean, she's hard to listen to. And basically now they're writing in the script all her medical problems. You can get into all that. She's got these twitches that happen, and she falls down getting into airplanes. They said that in one episode they said she had she hit her head and had a concussion and then a blood clot in the brain. And now she won't release her medical records, which are of interest even to the scriptwriter, even to the reviewers. And the reviewers of this huge theatrical show, I've said, are the mainstream media and much of the alternative media, who hasn't yet caught on to the connection between the writers and the producers of this theatrical event and the actual theatrical event that is fiction. So look at this as you're watching a movie. But the real difference is that they turn this movie. Now, you go to a Hollywood movie that deals with the same things they do: deception, political intrigue, murder, genocide, pedophilia, all these things you see in Hollywood. But after you watch it, nothing really, I mean, it's all fiction, right? You get out of the movie theater and, whatever Bruce Willis did, or whatever De Niro or any of these actors in Hollywood, they haven't yet gotten the real big part that and none of them will. They're scheduled to be Hollywood actors, B.A. actors the rest of their lives. It's only the special people that get to perform in the biggest theatrical events. So the difference between that, Hollywood, and what happens in your movie we're watching today, and they're going to be giving you another performance today. Both of the main actors are, well, Obama, who's been brought back to be a main actor because the old hag actress really can't handle it, so they got to give her some help. He's vacationing now, so he's not, and how I look at it is this: he's been written into the script, the real serious part, in October, I found out, because I read, I have some connections, and I talk to some of the people behind the scenes who have written this stuff already. So he's coming in, he's going to take a little vacation now. I think he's at Martha's Vineyard, relaxing, and he's going to really take part in this show in October, where he's scheduled to be with her on the campaign trail. Now, what was I getting at? So we're going to look at Hillary Clinton next week, because today I want to dedicate, and maybe even the next show, to the writers and the producers of this grand theatrical event. And the difference really is that in this event, they actually turn fantasy into reality after they do their shows every day. Okay? And how they do that is they have the reviewers of this movie, being the media, realize that they play a part in this too. They are actually in the play itself, because they are in bed with the writers, the producers, the actors, and then they kind of give you a story that you, by hook, line, and sinker, and believe is real. But the only real deal here is people die, really, here. People really lose their lives. People get sick. They're being poisoned with our air, water, and they have this ability to turn this theatrical play with the help of the media, who actually are supporting actors in this, and I'll get into that in another time. And they turn it into reality because we believe it. If we didn't believe it, it wouldn't be real. They would know what to do. So that explains why, and I looked into this, why certain people who write also scripts about who these people really are can't get their story in this movie. Okay, let me give you an example. Today, the actress Hillary Rotten Clinton, as she's called by Trump, or Corrupt Hillary, or the Queen of Corruption, etc., etc., released her income tax reports. Okay? And she made an exorbitant amount of money, paid 34% tax, etc., etc. Now, let me tell you why only their writers get to produce this play. Now, I had a friend named Robert Carlson, okay? And Robert was an attorney. He's passed away in 2008 or 9. And Robert's been on my show many times, and he was a writer that tried to get his story into this movie, and specifically that the income tax is an illegal tax. And he wanted the candidates to say that when they were doing the 2008 performance. They wouldn't accept it. He was denied. He just got, basically, he sent the script in to them, and they said, no, we don't want this to be part of it because it would really destroy what we've done in the past. We have created an illegal tax, but the people think it's illegal. And if you really give great arguments that there is no income, the income tax is illegal, nobody's going to pay. And so the importance of her releasing her taxes and not telling the truth would really destroy many of our past shows, so we can't do it. So there's one perfect example of how people that are really trying to get to the truth and add their story in and it goes on and on. I know other writers who would love the main characters. This goes back to Ronald Reagan in a sense, who want the main characters to talk about the real deceptive Jesuit order, how the Vatican controls foreign policy. And wow, what a story that would be to actually see these guys get up during the presidential election and state the truth about the producers and writers. But you see, they can't, because they suck up to them, and the only way they get their parts is if they lie to the American people, who take it as real. It's a fantasy, it's a movie. So what I'm getting at is they have a corner on this script. You can't get your story in. It's kind of like Hollywood. There's only certain things that the leftists in Hollywood will allow into the mainstream. Ask some Christian writers, script writers, who wanted to get their stories told in Hollywood, a good, wholesome story. No, Christianity is taboo in Hollywood. And it is dealt with in this main movie as if it's kind of outdated. That's how they predict. They show us Christianity, fanatics. And, they want the evangelical vote in the main movie here on TV. But you know what? They don't tell the truth about the evangelicals selling out Christianity and actually selling themselves out. Most of the evangelicals. I'm not talking about the real. We wanted to even get the story about the Alamo ministry into this movie, where it would be a perfect story where one of the candidates could get up and say, listen, we got to get Tony Alamo out of jail because he's been wrongfully accused of these crimes. He's a Christian. He's a real Christian. And all the people that with that ministry have had their children stolen from them. This would be a grand story if they really want to help Christians. But you see, they distorted who Christians really are in this main movie we call the presidential election. So people that try to get their scripts, they just are not accepted. And I'll get into the second half hour, some of the nuts and bolts of who these people are, the Jesuits. But I'm just trying to explain to you, in fact, I tried to get my stories in many, many times. The story, and it goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan. Now, let me just say, I'm going to pretend like I don't have any notes in front of me right now. Let's pretend I'm just having a cup of coffee with you. And let me just rattle off a few things on how I got interested in this story and how I became a writer that wanted to add my 2 cents, write my script into this big movie in the presidential elections that's always turned down. In fact, they call me goofy. They call me a crackpot. They call me a conspiracy theorist. They call me way out. I'm going, why? There's so much evidence here in history that's been overlooked or distorted by you guys who are writing this movie. Can't we just have at least one episode? No way. They won't allow that anymore. So, I tell you, I feel discriminated against as a writer. And I know there's many other script writers out there that feel the exact same way, because they want their story told. Now, I've been told by insiders who know me that the reason they won't accept my story is because people won't believe it. I go, what do you mean? Yeah, they're going to look at it like it's way out of line, and and I said, well, can't we try? No way, it doesn't get on the big stage. And the reason it doesn't, I figured, was that they have brainwashed everybody so bad with their story that they've made people that are really telling a great story of truth to seem like it's fiction. They've kind of turned the tables. What's black is white, white is black. Here's a perfect example. Now, how did I get involved with this? In fact, I am having a cup of coffee. Let me use the next 5 minutes to tell you. In 1972, I was a journalist. I was one of the reviewers of this grand play. I was even, in fact, remember during Ford and Jimmy Carter, I was a journalist reviewing this, actually believing that that was real. Yes, I didn't know who the writers were, the Jesuits, who they really were. I just thought they were a bunch of priests, because I grew up a Catholic. The Holy Cross Fathers, I went to Notre Dame. Loyola High School in Chicago was close to us. And there was always this thing between these two schools like, oh, you guys are just being taught by the Holy Cross Fathers, and they're not as smart as the Jesuits. It was like this elite school was better than us. Okay, fine. So anyway, I became a journalist, and I wanted to get to the truth. I had no idea who these people were. But in 1972, I was working on a newspaper. I believe I was working for Capital Cities. They owned a bunch of newspapers, and the one I was working for was in Belleville, St. Louis area. And I remember Ronald Reagan got elected, was just nominated as the president. And looking back on it, Reagan was actually one of the few actors that actually worked in Hollywood that was given the nod to work on the big show, to be on the big stage, and became the nominee. Now at the time, I didn't understand the Hegelian dialectic, and at the time the Democratic Party was actually, they've depicted them as being the people who were working towards freedom and all these things. The Democrats are much different now. They're socialist, and they've really gone off the deep end in their little game here. So I was really upset about Reagan. I didn't like this kind of conservative view. I was no different than a lot of people. And so, I said to myself, I'm out of here. I don't know what caused me to say that. So I tried everything, and I finally got myself out of America very quickly, found a little work in Italy, and ended up there. Little did I know that our paths would cross, Reagan's and mine, in the most craziest of ways. But as I got to Rome, and I was lucky because I started to learn who the producers really were and who these writers, Jesuits, were. And I remember Reagan, when he took office, he was the first president to implement diplomatic relations with the producers and writers of this great play with our country. Yes, he instituted relations that were cut off since they were found out by our statesmen back in Lincoln that they were involved in the assassination of Lincoln. So immediately in that script they wrote, boy, they were cut off. And guess what happens? Reagan institutes that. So when I first happened, I didn't understand it. I thought it was a big deal. They're just a bunch of priests anyway. But then I started researching it. Happened to be in Rome, seeing all the corruption. And the big event for me was this, as I was learning this in the early 80s. Reagan was coming to visit Italy for the first time, to Rome, where I was. And at the time I was working for the American newspaper there. And if you go to an AP article written regarding me, I can prove what I'm going to say is true. I was almost killed in a bombing in Rome. I was the only American in the building at the time, along with an Italian, when a leftist group called I don't know who they were, some crazy, they always had they were doing terrorism there to test it out, like they're doing it now, but on a global scale. And so they said that they put the bomb in there for the hangman, Reagan, and I was almost 10 seconds away from getting killed. So when I started researching terrorism, I had a personal interest in it. And Reagan was basically the conduit. He was the one that kind of forced me out of America. Then to add injury to insult, he almost killed me there. And so I'm going, there's some reason I'm here for a reason. This is too coincidental. So I started researching the producers and the writers, and boy, did I find out some real interesting stories that I tried to get into the big play that was constantly getting turned down. And it's taken me a long time to figure out why. And we're going to get into some of those things when I come back in the second half hour. Remember, we're talking about the biggest stage play ever produced in the history of this world, the 2016 presidential elections. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today. so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this August 12th, 2016 day on our calendar. And we're going over the writers and producers of this grand stage play, which I call the greatest theatrical event ever created in the history of mankind, and that's the 2016 presidential elections. I might add that this show has been going on every 4 years. They put it on. Different actors. We have some of the same ones this year, along with a new guy, the flamboyant billionaire, Donald Trump. And it's quite a show, quite a show. And in some of my past shows, this is part 6, I've tried to talk about their connections to the writers and the producers, showing that there's favoritism, just like there is in Hollywood when you try to get a part. Many times people are precast. Many times you hear stories about actresses and actors who do things with the producers and directors in order to get a job, and many of the big-time actors have sold out in Hollywood. Sold out for money, sold out for whatever, to get their big face on the screen. Little did they know that that wasn't the biggest show. And they think it is, but it really isn't. The biggest show is being performed right now every day for ourselves to. You can go today, and both actors that are the lead ones in this show, Hillary and Donald, are performing in different parts of the country, doing rallies and all this kind of stuff. So you can catch what they're saying. And the reason I do this on my show is that we're looking through this through the prism of a moviegoer. And I want you to do the same for at least an hour a day. I know a lot of people, even that listen to my show, have turned off the mainstream media, turned off these events. And my goal is to get you to at least watch a little bit so you can see exactly how this thing is progressing and how much fun it can be if you accept what's really going on as fantasy. And then and this helps you to really establish yourself and live in the real world, not live in their fantasy world. And I hope this is a way that will get people to listen, even that are part of the choir, that know the Vatican-led New World Order is very powerful in the world and actually leading us to hell and back. But also for new people who really want to get an idea what's going on through this kind of prism, this lens that I'm looking at it, which is a little bit more laid back than a lot of criticism people have when you start talking about the Vatican and their and you can find so much on the internet now. A lot of people are catching on, but many people that have, and the majority haven't, they look at it and they just get turned off. It's too serious. It's too outlandish. It's too this and that. But let me tell you something. Hopefully this, looking at it through kind of like it's a movie, will get people to really think about it. And because that's really what it is. When you look at what they're doing and you have a basis of fact on really who the writers are of this play they're putting on every year. And why do I say this is the big, huge play, the big start? Because everything emanates from this. Every 4 years they have to reset and get their goals established. Now, that's where it gets interesting. They have an agenda. It's kind of like writing a Hollywood. You know how Mario Puzo wrote The Godfather series? He had this thing written out for three movies, etc. And so that's what they've done. They've been doing this for hundreds of years, and every 4 years, at least in our country, who has become really their military power around the world, we're the key to this. And so they reset this show every 4 years for a reason. And if you read the advance scripts, which many people in Hollywood get, many people on this show get too, on this stage get too, they've mapped this thing out all the way to what they call the end times. And they use biblical things a lot. And we did that yesterday, and there's a lot more to that. They use a lot of they know the Bible, but they copy it. And they deceive you with it. And that's an interesting aspect to their movie. How they want to create a one-world government, a one-world religion, a one-world, they're even going to bring back a fake Messiah. And they're using technology. It's an incredible story they're writing. On top of the political intrigue, the deception, the pedophilia, the sexual perversion, and all the stealing and money problem. Yeah, on top of that, they got this whole thing kind of mapped out. It's already pre-written. So my interest is knowing that the outcome of this election is already predetermined. We kind of play a game with ourselves, and it's human nature. Who's going to really win? Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be Obama staying in office? Is it going to be Clinton? They know who's going to do it, and we can't help ourselves but to wonder. And so hopefully looking at it through a movie reviewer, looking like me, reviewing this grand show, we can really try to figure out how they do this. Now, have they done it in the past? Of course they have. And I'll, in our future shows, show how they actually scripted FDR's election, how they scripted even John Kennedy's, and there's a couple others that I've got some information on. And that's just since the time of television, okay? Well, FDR wasn't. He was a little bit prior to TV. But anyway, there's a lot of great information to show how they've done this in the past. So what I wanted to do, I told you my story of Reagan, how I got interested in this movie, because he's one of the few that have really made it from Hollywood into this big show, into the big show as a president. He was there for 8 years and has been remembered as probably one of the greatest actors on this huge stage. Yes. And so we had to look into Reagan, and he played an important role in my personal life, as I explained in the last half hour, so that I really started to find out the behind-the-scenes stuff that really goes on. Just like when you're in Hollywood, you like to find out how these movie producers hire these people and make all this money, and what do they got to do to get there? Well, it's the same thing here. And so what I found out was a whole completely different story that's been covered up by these writers. So it made me think, who are they? Shouldn't we know? And wouldn't that give us an idea of what they have in the future planned for us by looking at first what they did in the past? So in the remainder of time here, I'm going to touch on a few things that interested me about these writers and where they came from. And I told you many times that they're very intelligent. They've written things out in the past, and let's see where it really started. And let me quote something here that came out of a friend of mine's book who passed away, Tupper Saucy. And I used to talk, I've had him on my show in the past. I used to talk to him, and very, very interesting guy, and I'll just save that for another day. But in his book, Rulers of Evil, he states this. He says, the curriculum of the Jesuit colleges came to be adopted to a great extent as the basis of the curricula in the European colleges generally. And this, you know who wrote that? Dr. James Walsh, Dean of Fordham, one of their Jesuit universities here. And he said this, a Walsh, a Jesuit. So they're telling you where this all started here in our country, the founding fathers of our American Republic, he says. That is to say, the groups of men who drew up and signed the Declaration of Independence, who were the leaders in the American Revolution, and who formulated the Constitution of the United States, were the majority of them educated in the colonial colleges or in the corresponding colleges abroad, which followed almost exactly Jesuit ratio studiorum, and that's Jesuit teachings. The fact has been missed to a great extent in our histories of American education. So even back during the days of the Founding Fathers, who have connections to the writers of this script, they were writing it back then. So we can start there if you want. I can go back farther, and we will, back even to the Protestant Reformation, and maybe even farther than that. But you got to remember this. Embedded, as according to Tupper, in this Jesuit ratio studiorum, the Jesuit method, were the elements of entertainment, of dramatic production, composition, rhetoric, eloquence. The courses interlinked with the spiritual exercises to intensify the experimentally Catholic doctrine over Scripture and Protestantism. They resulted in a genre of spectacular plays that won distinction as, quote, Jesuit theater. So the word was so... I am, you that are skeptical about me telling you that these writers are Jesuits, listen to this. The first Jesuit theater was performed in Vienna in 1555, nearly 40 years before the emergence of Shakespeare. It was instantly popular and quickly spread to other parts of Europe. Between 1597 and 1773, more than 500 Jesuit theatrical performances were staged in the Lower Rhine regions alone. Okay, let's stop right there. And you can go find all this. So, I'm trying to make the connection here, factually, that these guys started out, they were involved. They learned their craft. They had their own theater performances before television and all this. And in fact, I remember having a guy on my show who tried to get his script into this grand performance that they're putting on today in America, the presidential elections. And he was a man from England, and he wrote a book. And what facts he found out on how, listen to this, Mozart was actually a concoction of the Jesuits. And the Shakespeare, my friends, didn't actually write those plays. It was the Jesuits who did. And boy, when you see the facts, I'm wondering why this was never put into history. Well, because, like, they don't put in what Robert Clarkson has to say about our IRS and all of the illegal income taxes that they collect. They did it even back then. And so they have a long history of this. I just wanted to point that out to you, okay? A long, long history of being involved in theater. They have just taken this to the next level. They've now gotten so much power in our country, and you can go back to other shows I did to find out how they've done this, that they can actually write the script for the huge presidential elections now. And they started with our founding fathers being in their pocket, many of them. And that's a story that needs to be told. And one of the things I remember talking to Tupper Saucio about was how come we can't get the Jesuit connection into the history books regarding their involvement in the Revolutionary War and how they kind of were the masterminds of it. And he said, for the same reason, Greg, that you can't get your stories in this script. They control it, and they want to control the narrative all the way to the end. Wow, interesting, interesting. So, let's look further at this. Okay, let's look at this aspect. And you know what? I'm going to probably have to do a couple more parts next week on these guys because they have so much information regarding... I'm just trying to establish how they become such great writers of this great, huge stage play they put on every 4 years, and how they've even produced it, you know, with the Vatican providing the impetus and the connection. It's amazing. But to show you that this has been pre-scripted, one of the things they do is they always involve in this kind of huge stage play wars. You know, you can look back and it was the World War II, it was the Vietnam War. They're always using wars that they create as a part of this stage play. The one they're on now is ISIS. Wow. They're on terrorism. And that has to do with radical Islam and the connections and how this might be the last World War III. They're always saying, why can there be World War IV or 5 or 6? I mean, there have been so many of them. We're used to it. In our country, we've only, you know, since the formation of our country, and I remember quoting this, we've only not been at war for some 20 years. So this is something that we're very used to. So why can't there be 5 or 6 or 7 or 8? I don't know. They say there's only going to be 3, and then the end times come and the false Messiah. But where does that come from? Well, in a book called The Enemy Unmasked, written by a friend of mine, Bill Hughes, he points out a real interesting point. He says the basis for this was written in August 15th, 1871, by Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini, as quoted in the book Descent into Slavery. Now, this letter I've quoted before on many shows. It shows you how they, back even then, they were planning these wars. Now, is this true? Is this letter fabricated? Oh, of course, the Jesuits and their minlings say yes, it is. But let's look at some evidence that says it's not. This actual letter once was in a museum in England, okay, and for all to see. It was in a historical museum in London for all to read. And guess what? Once somebody started probing, they took it out. Right, okay? So that's one good reason that this could be true. And I believe it is, because knowing how they do these things, getting inside and seeing, for example, my personal experience with them started in Italy, like I said, and they were writing these things there that are going on today. And I found that out, God, through so many different experiences I had there. So I realized these guys are pretty deceptive. They are doing a hell of a job in deceiving the world, and I wanted to get my story in. And God, I can't. I still can't. I want this to be in the big presidential show, and I can't. And I've even written, you know, things like the president actually, you know, like Donald Trump, and I've written some things Hillary Clinton should really say, and I'm going to do that on another show that's been rejected. For what? It would be even a better story, wouldn't it? And they say, no, they won't believe you. That's too fanciful. And then I said, well, don't you have this mixed up? What you're saying is fancy, and what I'm saying is truth. Oh, you get into an argument like that, you always lose. They get too much money, too much power, and they've learned to deceive people so well through the course of history that they've even been called the big trickster, working with Satan himself. And I don't doubt it, because when I was in Rome, I saw and I talked to people that talked about satanic worshiping in the Vatican. And I did stories on it. Now, couldn't I get that in this play? Can you imagine if Hillary Clinton got up and said the truth? Yes, I support the Vatican. I've been hired by them. And there is actually satanic worshiping going on there. Wow. That'd be kind of interesting. But anyway, it won't happen. So this letter of Giuseppe Mazzini goes something like this. This plan was outlined in graphic detail by Pike, the sovereign grand commander of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite Freemasonry and the top illuminist in America. In a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, dated August 15, 1871, Pike stated that the First World War was to be fomented in order to destroy Tsarist Russia, and to place that vast land under the direct control of Illuminati Vatican agents. He didn't use the word Vatican, I just added that. Russia was then to be used to be a boogeyman, to further the aims of the Illuminati worldwide. World War II was to be fomented through manipulation of the differences that existed between the German nationalists and the political Zionists. This was to result in an expansion of Russian influence and the establishment of the State of Israel in Palestine. All that happened. The Third World War was planned to result from the differences stirred up by the Illuminati agents between the Zionists and the Arabs, Muslims. The conflict was planned to spread worldwide. That's what it's doing now. The Illuminati, I'll add the Vatican, said the letter, planned to unleash the atheists, the Muslims, and provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all of its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism and terror, origins of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization and the multitude and disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass, direction, anxious for an ideal, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the Pew doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view, a manifestation which will result from the general reactionary movements which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Des Griffin wrote that in Descent into Slavery. So, anyway, we've talked about that before, but they're not going to tell you these things because it's kind of like, is Mario Puzo going to tell you what he wrote in Godfather 3 when Godfather 1 was on the screen? No. They got to keep you in suspense. So we've got information showing that they've written this script out. And so that tells you factual. I like logic, don't you? If they've written it out going so far ahead, haven't they written out the script who's going to be the next president here? Of course. They're just not going to tell us, and it leaves it up to our human nature to wonder why, who, how did it happen? Well, let me tell you how they do it. I'm going to do this in 5 minutes, and this will lay groundwork for what we're going to do next time. Here's what they do. They set up a psyops. You know what that is. They get the media to script and fake the footage from one of their many studios in the CGI and their actors, and you can say that for most anything. The elections, all these terrorist activities. Then they set up compensation funds worth billions from the pockets of the willfully ignorant taxpayers. Now I'm talking about how they're managing to get into this World War III with ISIS. Allow the fund to be managed by a Jesuit scumbag. 5. Pay out fraudulent claims to these victims to frontmen or agencies like the Jesuit CIA to be later deposited into the Vatican Bank or other banks, or to be used later for drug trafficking and sex slavery and pedophilia rings and the furthering of these terrorist groups that they've already predicted would happen in their script. Then they use Hegelian dialectic techniques and control the opposition media, send out spooks, agents, shills to detract from the truth. Yes, that's how you do it. They use the Hegelian dialectic. Get people looking, all the unsuspecting people watching this movie now are either Republicans or Democrats, they're fighting. But really what's going on behind the scenes, even with their new war they created with terrorism, is all this stuff. And then, if anybody finds out, they kill anyone who draws or blows the whistle in such a treasonous act, calling them crazy, calling them insane, they were suicidal, etc., etc. Then they throw into this movie that they're doing right now so much occult satanic numerology and stuff, as possible to seal the deal between themselves. It's their little code that they do so that they know who's writing this play and that they're on the right track. And they do this, they revisit the strategy and repeat the process over and over again. So that's in a nutshell how they are now using another war, like the War on Terror, to basically add it to their movie that they're presenting us. And so I want you to look at it from that kind of idea. This is all scripted. These things are all written out in advance. And all I wanted to do, and many writers, many people who are out there seeking to tell people this is a staged event, they can't get their scripts approved. And I wonder why. And the real reason is you can't even work. Look, if you want to work for the media as one of the reviewers of this grand movie going on now, the presidential elections, you can't do it if you add things like we talk about on this show. They will fire you. They will kill you. They will do everything to make you out to be nuts. They'll probably drug you. And they've done this to people in the past. So, and in fact, we talked about that just the other day when one of their stories that they're trying to get out was really not the way they wanted it in the script. And so this guy, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, who some people say are working with them, gets information from a whistleblower, and he was working for the Democratic Party, and he was supposedly giving out information that was very contradictory to one of the candidates, Clinton, who they may have ordained to be the next president. And he was found killed in Washington. So I told you, real people die. Guess what? He was shot in the back of the head, and they did not rob him or anything. They left everything there. So he didn't kill himself. It wasn't a robbery. And Julian Assange got on and said, you know, our informants face a lot of danger. So people actually do die in the results of this fantasy movie they put on. Okay, we're going to get back to that Wednesday with part 7. We're going to be back then, so we'll be back Monday with other stuff. Have a good evening. Hope you enjoyed the theatrical event, 2016 presidential elections. See you later.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.